Welcome to the For Real Though Show, the podcast with a purpose for the peoples. I'm your host, Christopher Keith. Hope all is well with you. Yeah, man. Probably like a lot of you, life be lifing sometimes. And for me, it is lifing. It's been lifing big time since we last talked to you we had Miss Deidre on. Shout out to Miss Deidre again, man, for a great interview. We're looking forward to having her back. But yo, I'm here. You're here. And so, regardless of what we're going through, man, we're still here, right? And that is a victory with itself. So, let's just take our W's with our L's and, everything else in between. So, that's so much better. Clean my glasses so much better. Anyway, so today we're going to talk about something about like people like to say this phrase is standing on business. And there are times when we all need to stand on business. So, let's talk about that a little bit. So, the first time I went to visit my sons, after they moved to Atlanta, I got two sons, Alex and Christian, and they moved when they were teenagers to Atlanta. They're both in their 30s now, so it's been quite a while ago. But I remember the first time I went to visit them, having a conversation with them about manhood. I think like being so far away from them, it just made me like feel an extra motivation to impart, experience, expertise into them. Uh, And it was obviously important because I knew they would be on their own, in terms of, not necessarily having a man around per se, unless their mother was dating, and then in that case, you just never know what kind of interest that person would take into your kids or whether your kids would take interested in them, you just never know. So I just remember just again, just as their father, wanting to impart certain things into them. So, we was riding down one of them Peachtree streets, and I explained to them, I said, hey, fellas, principally as a man, there are certain things that you will be able to deal with and take that I may not be able to deal with and take, right? And also, there are things that I may be able to take and deal with that you won't be able to take and deal with. That And when I say take, I mean, just accept. Like sometimes people do or say things to you, and then you have a choice to make as to whether you're going to address it or whether you won't, how you're going to address it, or whether it's just something you can let go. And so I explained to them that, your standard doesn't have to be my standard, nor does my standard have to be yours. And the only way you would know when enough is enough and when you need to put your foot down and whether you should stand your ground or whether you should, let it go is, really just to recognize the difference in the feeling you have and whether this is your desire to respond and the way you respond is the difference between your principles and your ego. Now, if it's your ego, then that's something, we'll get back to that, what I'm saying? But, if it's your ego and the ego by mean that I mean, you want to get in some get back, or to show someone your prowess and that sort of thing, well, that's something you just really have to evaluate whether you want to go down that road. I strongly advise, in most cases, responding through your ego is probably not worth it. Sometimes it may be, but, you know, and it, and, because every time and everything, we want to stick our chest out and get people about, off of us. I can dig that. But even within that, I believe if you stand on principle in that matter, then the way you communicate your stance and then what you say and how you say it, that's something you can live with. You could live with the consequences of what it is that you spitting out, right? So, again, I can relate. See, if you think about most fights get started by words. It's not really about what somebody does, it's usually what somebody says. That's how most wars get started. And you could get upset at your job and you can lose your job, right? Uh, but if you lost your job because you stood on a principle, then I would say, as a man, that's something you can live with because you have to be able to look yourself in the mirror and know that you're a man. You can't. especially black men, we've had a history of having to reduce ourselves to make people feel comfortable. And, especially in society, in the marketplace, right? So, there's a certain amount of that you can do, and then there's a certain amount of it you can't do. Being a person who's worked in corporate America for most of my life, I've experienced that conundrum many, many, many a day. And I recall that in my younger days, when I first started getting jobs, once I got out of the service, when I first started getting jobs, uh, I remember, this was my get down. If you wanted to know who Chris McCaleb was, in terms of an employee, I'm beat on time, I care about what I do very passionately. So when I was flipping burgers, I was a badass burger flipper. You know what I'm saying? I was dropping them fries like they was hot. I was no joke. Once I learned what I needed to do, then I just always had a drive of excellence. So, that was me. That's always been me. And I've always been kind and courteous and respectful, but at the same time, I had this standard about me that like this standard of fairness, if you will, sort of naivete, of fairness. And so my philosophy overall was just like, hey, I'm good. I'm gonna have a good time. I'm gonna come in here and do a great job. Yes, sir, no, sir. Be a great team player in the whole nine. But don't try to say nothing. If you're like a person in authority, well, don't try to embarrass me in front of people. Don't try to front me and that kind of thing, because then another person was gonna come out. A person who was like just not gonna stand that. I had come from a childhood of verbal abuse and embarrassment and stuff like that. And I think that part of my emancipation in emancipating myself at the age of 14, not like officially from my mother and stepfather, but I left. Like a lot of people know this, but for those of you who don't, when I was 14 years old, I left my mother's house and moved to another state because me and my stepfather did not get along at all. We were oil and water, and he was very verbally abusive. So I emancipated myself from that situation. And so I think that that's always been like I've always carried that with me. And so that was me, so if somebody came at me wrong, especially somebody white, because that's most of my bosses were white, most of my bosses have been white. Then, I just wasn't down for the disrespect. I remember working at this one place and, I bust tables and stuff. That's what I was doing. And this one white manager, man, he was just always picking on black folks. So much so, and I remember I didn't have a car, so I would catch the bus to work. And, I would change clothes and stuff like that when I would, get out of my work clothes and change into my, outfit or whatever to get back on the bus to go home. And I remember this one manager was like, was always on black folks for some one thing or the other. And then one time he wanted to check my bag, like before I left, as if I was stealing something. And I knew that there was this other dude that was a cook named Keith who came in with a bag every single day, white boy, and they never, ever, ever checked his bag. And so this one time, I seen it happen a couple times, and I don't remember if I let him check my bag before or not. But I know this one particular time, I was like, yeah, that motherfucker ain't checked. He ain't checked these white boys' bags, so he ain't checking mine. So he wanted to check my bag, and I was like, no, you know, why not? Yeah, because I'm not a thief. You're not gonna be going through my bag, and you don't be checking Keith's bag. Like that was me. I was like, fight the power. You know what I'm saying? So, that was during them '80s. That was Chuck D. You know what I'm saying? So that was my attitude. I was like, if you're gonna check everybody's bag, you can check my bag. But if you ain't gonna be checking everybody's bag, or you're gonna be checking black folks' bag, but not white folks, I'm not the one. So, so yeah, I got fired. You know what I'm saying? And because we had some words after that, and but I was okay with it. I have to get another job. Sure. I mean, back in the day, man, I had a shit ton of jobs. Like, so it wasn't nothing to it. As a matter of fact, I held multiple jobs all the time. At that age. So yeah. But I could look at myself and be like, you know what? Principally, as a man, I will be betraying my own soul. Like I couldn't articulate it that way, but I knew that I would be betraying my own soul if I didn't stand up for myself based on that principle. It wasn't an ego thing where I was like, well, I'm gonna tell you something, I'm gonna set this place out, you know what I mean? Or I'm gonna let this manager know what time it is. It wasn't none of that at all. It was really from a standpoint of just pure, righteousness and standing up for a principle. Like, hey man, somebody has to tell you that this is not okay. And even though I was a very, very young man, I was just willing to stand on that. I just had this sense of justice in me. It was just, this just always was in me. So that's what I was telling my sons, at the time. And I don't think I gave them that example, but I was just letting them know that the most important thing as a man, and I don't, trust me, when I say as a man, I'm not making it a gender thing, because I believe that women, you know, are also, having to make that choice every day too. They are no less empowered. Women are no less empowered. They are no less capable. They are no less responsible, for also having that same attitude and standing up for themselves. So when I say man, I mean I'm referring to them as men because I am a man and because I'm talking to males. I'm talking to young black males, right? And I know that their struggle is going to be a little more specific and a little bit different from, you know, the female perspective. Nothing wrong with saying that. One's not greater than the other. They're just different. They're just different. And because I had already experienced a lot of that, I was able to talk to them about it. So, and I was having a conversation with Alex not too long ago. We had a great conversation. And we kind of talked about that. We were reminded of that. And I know that both of my sons, Christian and Alex, they are both very, very principled dudes, and they understand, when there's a time to compromise and there's a time to, stand up and say and do what you got to do. So with that being said, I give you a story of something that happened to me not too long ago. So I was officiating a volleyball match at a school, and I won't mention the school, but this particular school I had to go to 2 days in a row. As officials, trust me, we do not want to go to a school 2 days in a row. It's probably the only time it's ever happened to me. But it's not a whole lot of volleyball officials. There's a whole lot of volleyball games. So, no big deal. And volleyball is not really generally a super confrontational sport, unless, maybe the competitors are really, really, really good and the margins are really tight. In this case, boys volleyball, it is City League, okay? So there are some good City League, ball players. When I say city, I mean kind of like, predominantly black, in the hood, if you will. Um, and so, the margins aren't that big. The margins aren't that small, rather. They're a lot larger, so it's much easier to see what's what. You know what I mean? There's not a lot of close calls to it. So anyway, but I was there this, particular day. And so the first day I was there, I'm the down ref. You have an up ref and a down ref, one on the ladder, one at the bottom. The one at the bottom, which is where I was at the time, I'm mostly looking at the net, I'm looking at rotations, and I'm helping what is the person on the ladder, which is the R1. I'm the R2. So I'm like just kind of helping them and echoing things back with them, checking lineups, entering substitutions, and all that good stuff. So we're in the midst of going back and forth, with this ball's getting hit back and forth between the teams and whatnot. Everything's gravy. And then all of a sudden, the buzzer goes off, like the scoreboard buzzer goes off, like, right in the middle of the play. Now, it just so happens that during that time, the play organically ended, like literally simultaneously. That buzzer went off, the play ended. And so, we were able to award the point to the appropriate team, and we didn't have to replay it because it just happened that quick. And so I stopped, turned around, and I asked the brother who was on the clock, because you had a brother on the clock, you had a sister doing the board. I mean, doing the book to keep the rotations in the school and all that stuff. So I was like, what's going on? And so the sister that was doing the book happens to be the athletic director. And she says, they out of alignment. That team's out of alignment, blah, blah, blah. The rotation's wrong, this, that, and the other. So we started talking about the rotations, and we did a lineup check, and we got everybody together. And so, but before we got back to play, I asked the brother, I was like, why'd you hit the buzzer though? You know what I'm saying? Like in the middle of the play. And he didn't say nothing. He just was like pointing to her, like kind of real low key. And I was like, okay, okay. So I said, ma'am, would you mind, from now on, please don't hit the buzzer during the match. Now, mind you, she's on the book. So she had to reach across his area to punch on the scoreboard, right? To punch on that play clock, to hit that buzzer. And so when he told me she did it, I was like, could you not do that again? And she's like, she got all attitude, right? She like, well, I was trying to get your attention, but you was over there doing whatever you was doing. And I'm like, I know that didn't make sense because I'm like, I know what I'm doing. I'm reffing the game. You know what I'm saying? Like, because mind you, where I'm standing, the table is behind me, right? So I can't see them unless I turn around. The table's directly behind me. So I said, okay, I just repeated myself. I said, that's fine. I said, all I'm just saying is, could you please make sure you don't hit the buzzer during play? She repeats herself. Well, I was just trying to get your attention, but you was over there doing whatever it is you was doing. And then I was like, you mean reffing the game? Is that what you're saying? So I'm like, okay, all I'm saying is now I'm like getting a little bit heated, because I'm like, this is stupid. Could you not hit the buzzer? Are we straight on that? So she doesn't look at me. She looks away. I don't see where we have a problem now. I mean, I don't understand. We got the problem solved, didn't we? Didn't we? And so from here, now I'm like, okay, time for me to fall back because if I don't fall back, it's only going downhill from there because I know me and then I see what I'm dealing with. So I turn around. I walk over to the R1 to explain to him what was going on. And as I was walking by, the coach looked at me, the coach of that same home team, it was his athletic director. He looks at me and he's like, man, I know she does this all the time. She does this all the time, but he was real subtle and smooth about it, So I was like, man, matter of fact, it's a friend of mine. We ref basketball together. So went over there, man, did the thing, man, went on about our business. Match is over. I'm on my way home and I get a notification on my phone that, I received the game fee. So the athletic director is usually the person that pays you, when you're done on the computer or what have you. So I see a notification on my phone. I got my money. Cool. So I go there the next day. Next day, I'm not even tripping off of what happened the day before, but I go back and this time I'm the R1, so I'm up on the ladder. Now, the brother who did the scoreboard the day before was not there. And so now you have the same athletic director doing the book and the scoreboard. And so we started play, you know, and volleyball games move kind of quickly. So before you know it, the score is 5-1. Officially, it's 5-1. However, on the scoreboard, it's 1-1. And the reason why it's 1-1 is because she's trying to do the book and the scoreboard at the same time. And basically, after a point, she's writing it down in the book, and then she adds the point. Meanwhile, while she doing all of that, I'm starting play again to keep the game flowing. And so by the time we get to officially 5-1, but 1-1 on the scoreboard, like my partner, who is now the R2 down, below where I was the day before, he's like having to stop like every other point. He's like stopping, like, hold on, and waiting on her to do her thing and then punch the board or whatever. And at one point, the a coach for the visiting team was like, "Hey, the score is 5-1," because this team was winning. And she goes, "You see me over here doing two things at the same time. Calm down." you know. So, and he was like, "Yo, whoa," you know what I'm saying? So now his energy is off, because of the way she came at him. And so after a few minutes, of doing that, I came down off the ladder. I think somebody called a timeout or something. So I came down and I approached the table and I said, "Okay, so we can't keep delaying the game because we've already stopped the game several times. Score might have been 10-3 or something by then, but we had moved a little bit further along the night. It was clear this was not sustainable. We're going to be here for 3 hours waiting on you to work this stuff out with this book." And so I said, "Can we get somebody to do the scoreboard while you do the book? Or vice versa. Don't make me no difference. Um, but this ain't sustainable." So she didn't want to get nobody to do it. And I was like, "Well, we don't have any flow to the game, so we need to have somebody to do the scoreboard." Like it's very easy. Like you're talking about pushing a button to add a home score or pushing the button right next to the button for the away score. So I'm like, well, but we can't do it this way. So the assistant coach for the home team volunteers and says, "Hey, I'll be happy to do it." And she's cool, no problem. You know what I mean? She starts walking over there. So then the AD she does this, hovering over the book and the scoreboard. And she embarrasses this sister, this young sister who's the assistant coach, by saying, uh, uh, "You get paid to coach, don't you? Don't you get paid to coach? You don't get paid to do the scoreboard. You don't get paid to do the scoreboard. So go on over there and coach." So she went back on about her business. And this is a black woman that I'm dealing with too. This AD is a black woman. And I was like, this is ridiculous. Now, mind you, she talking about what people don't get paid to do, but she's the athletic director. She don't get paid to do the damn scoreboard or the book, right? She obviously there because she want to be. You know what I mean? And we have two line judges who are students. So they're really not getting paid to do that. They're volunteers. They ain't been trained other than a brief, synopsis of us telling them what to do and how to put the flag down, how to put the flag up and all this other kind of stuff. We giving them a brief synopsis, like less than 5 minutes. And we really don't count on them that much. It's kind of like if I don't know whether the ball was in bounds or out, then I'm going to look at you a little extra hard for you to tell me. But most of the time, these kids, some of them are really good. Some of them didn't check out. You know what I mean? Because they just watching the game. So I'm like, and so she tells me, this AD, she's like, "Well, if you want to, we could just wait until Mr. So and so get here because he ain't here yet." So now she want to hold up the whole damn game to wait for this other person. So at that precise moment, and I'm trying to figure out what I'm about to do. Uh, then the gentleman that worked the scoreboard the day before starts walking in the door. He walks into the gym. When he walks in the gym, the fans, the players from both sides, all erupted into cheering. So they're like, "Yay, great!" And so she looks at me and goes, "See, I don't know what you were so upset about." So it was at that moment that I said, "You know what? Your attitude is foul. Your attitude was foul yesterday and it was foul today. You are straight tripping." I told her straight up, like in the voice that I'm talking to you is right now. That's what I said. So again, she don't look at me, but you can tell she's pissed. And she goes, "I'm gonna tell your sign on you. I'm gonna tell your assigner. I said, well, look, make sure you spell my name right. And don't think that you're the only one that's got a keyboard. And here's what she didn't know. Number one, I worked in corporate America. I know how to write up a letter. Number two, I'm a writer. And number three, my letter, my written dissertation will sound far superior than yours because I do this. I'm a communicator. This is what I do. I can paint a narrative, tell a story, or whatever. And especially, I'm standing on business, standing on truth. Oh, I know how to parse, articulate, demonstrate, and the whole nine. It's like, cool, whatever. You know what I'm saying? You do what you got to do. Spell my name right. So my man came in. We went on and did the game, right? So at this point, since she didn't already threaten me, I'm like, I'm already gonna write the assigner myself. As a matter of fact, I'm gonna write the assigner and I'm gonna write the head of officials for the state of Ohio. How about that? But I didn't do it right away. I went home. I didn't get no notification of payment. And I said to myself, now watch she don't pay me. Watch she don't pay me. Because it's just kind of the trifling she is. And so I waited. I think I went home, watched some NBA or something, chilled out, got up the next morning, still ain't got paid. I called my partner. I said, hey man, you get paid from last night? He was like, yeah, I got paid. Shoot, a few minutes after we left. Cool. Don't think I didn't add that into the letter. So I articulated the whole situation. Everything that went down the day before, everything that went down that day, how she embarrassed the assistant coach. And I began to talk about, like, even in this letter, I was like, you know what? When it comes to games in the city, there are like not a lot of resources. You don't have a lot of help. And there are times when we really just have to pool ourselves together. We have to pool our resources together and do a little extra, do a little more, just so the kids can enjoy this contest and compete just like any other kid, right? In any other school. There have been times where we didn't even have a book, and I'm literally tracking substitutions on a piece of paper in my hand, right? I've done that, like without complaint. You know what I mean? And furthermore, I like going to the hood. I like being around my people. I like, shout out to Jesse Hines, my man's. Like, we're two people who love to go to the city, do city league games, right? We want to be in the community. And I know cats who don't like I know black people who don't. There was a guy on my football crew who every chance he got, he talked nasty about black people. And it's funny because he's from the hood, and he likes to use that as cred. You know how some black people are. I'm from the hood. I'm from the hood. It's like it's some kind of cred. But then, since they done got out in the suburbs now and been living that life, then all of a sudden, every time you talk about crime, every time you talk about, just negative things in the country, they always talk about black people. Well, those people over there, that kind of stuff. And me and him used to butt heads all the time. Thank God he retired. But that I'm not that guy. You know what I'm saying? I work I work anywhere, but I love working in the hood. So anyway, I wrote my letter, sent it off, emailed it off. It was dope. Let me just tell I'm not gonna read it, but it was dope. It was on point. I read it, checked it, did the whole nine. I got an immediate response from the assigner, who apologized profusely, said she was very sorry for that experience, guaranteed me that I would get paid that afternoon, you know. And within 90 minutes, I was paid. Also, what came to bear was I had another game scheduled later that month at that school. And she was like, the assigner was like, well, after talking to this person, and talking to you, I think it's just best that you don't go back there right now, which I was fine with it. You know what I'm saying? So it's cool. So cool. Everything's cool. Uh, I get removed from the game that I had from that I had coming up at this same school, like 2, 3 weeks later. And then I get another game assigned on the same day at a different location. Sweet. So, but fast forward a few weeks later, which happened to be maybe a week to 10 days ago, I went to another school in the city. And when I walked in the building, I noticed that it was the same team that I did their home games. They were the visiting team. And when I walked in, like all of them started cheering. So all the kids was like, my favorite ref and all this other kind of stuff. Coaches came over, gave me dap, gave me love, and was like, yo, good to see you, man. And I don't know whether they looked at the list and saw that it was me that was going to be one of their referees. I don't know. But they was like just giving me love, man, just showering me with hugs and stuff. And I was tripping. And so the person that was working the table at this school was like, what's going on with this? You know what I'm saying? Because again, now I'm in this different school and they wondering, why you so cool on this ref? And one of the kids said, ah, he cool. Hey, he straight up dude. He checked my AD. And and so then the coaches started telling me some stories and stuff. And then because now, they're free, right? They don't have this person hovering over them. And they was like my one boy was like, man, she does this. Like she was doing that all year. Like every game, she was being disruptive. And I'm tripping because nobody said nothing to her. You know what I'm saying? Like nobody said nothing to her. And that's part of the problem. Like, just could this behavior just continued. Ain't nobody said nothing to you. And they also told me that since that day when I was there and after I made my report, she hadn't been to any more of the games. So they just assigned somebody to do the book and the scoreboard. So here's the lesson in this for me. Here's where I was coming from. As an abiding principle, I have to tell you one thing I cannot tolerate and I can't stand is a bully, you know? And I could tell that this person is a bully. And she was used to bullying everybody around her, being a smart ass, belittling them, talking down to them. And it just irked my soul. And I feel like if other officials would have said something and addressed it before, then it never would have had to get to the point where I had to. You know what I'm saying? But a lot of times people just let stuff go, so often that it's giving this person permission to keep doing what they're doing. And here's the other thing about it too. Like, so my addressing it, and this is how I know again, was the principle or ego. My addressing it was never meant to change her. Okay. She free to do whatever she wants or whatever, at the very least, whatever she felt like she can get away with. The only reason I confronted her and called her out was because it was the right thing to do, period. And regardless of what she does with that information, it became my duty to inform her that her behavior in this situation and the way she treated the game and all those affected by slowing the game down, players, coaches, fans, embarrassing that assistant coach, and defying the officials. Now, mind you, the officials are in charge of adjudicating the match. School administration is supposed to help us facilitate the match, not run it themselves. So, you know, regardless of what she did with the information, though, it could not be said that the behavior was not addressed. You see what I'm saying? And I knew again, for me personally, it don't mean that, and maybe that's why some of the other people didn't say nothing, because maybe it wasn't meant for them to say. Maybe they didn't have it in them to say. Maybe they didn't have the right words, maybe they didn't have the right motivation. Maybe they were scared, or maybe they was just like, no, who cares? I don't know. But for me, it was like, no, you're gonna get this information. Now, what you do with it after that is fine, but you're gonna hear it. You're gonna hear it. Now, once you hear it, you're responsible for it. And whatever you do after that is your business. But it ain't gonna be said that the C to the Mac didn't tell you what was up. So now, and I said something earlier, about how can you tell, whether it's your, ego or your principles. Well, I give you an example of ego. So I'm like anybody else. I got ego, you know what I'm saying? And I ain't afraid to stick my chest out. It's not really my thing. It ain't my get down for real. I'm a pretty laid back dude for real, you know what I'm saying? And I love working with people. But I got an ego, you know what I'm saying? And here's how you can know like some ways to know whether you're coming from your ego or whether you're coming from your principle, your core, okay? So like say for instance, if you feel your temperature rising, your heart beating fast, and that sort of thing in the midst of a conflict, then that's your fight, your fight or flight, that's your fight, coming through. Those chemicals are released from your brain to fight and protect yourself and stuff like that. So between fighting, that can flow over into your ego. You know what I'm saying? Because you want to let a motherfucker know, that type of thing. You know what I'm saying? Get up off me, raise up, you know what I'm saying? Bag off, et cetera, et cetera. Another way you could tell, and I know I'm sure this happens to more than just me, but like you leave a situation and you get away from it for a little bit, and you be like, man, I should have said this. Man, I wish I'd have go back. I'd have said that. You know what I'm saying? Most of the time, that's probably your ego. You know what I'm saying? It's funny, but it happens. You know what I'm saying? So that's your ego. But if you're calm, even if you feel passionate about it, you could be passionate and still calm. And if you're passionate, and you feel some energy, but you still calm, and you know that this is not about defending yourself per se, but it's about defending the principle that you're standing on, even if you're the object of the principle, then you can stand on that. You know what I'm saying? You can stand on that and deal with, again, whatever comes with it. It doesn't mean it will be easy. It doesn't mean that you will get the results that I got in that particular situation, where somebody actually came along later on and bagged you up and said, hey, man, you did the right thing. Sometimes it'll happen. Sometimes it won't. Sometimes it may be a disaster. However, again, everyone has to know what their where their principles lie and what they feel like can be let go and what they feel like, no, I'm gonna have to say something about this. So that's the important thing. So anyway, that's it for today. I hope you understand what I'm saying. Man, and it's funny because I've had to, like, it just seemed like within the last week, almost a week, like I ain't gonna even lie to you, in several situations, in several situations, I'm just gonna be real blunt about it. I've had to get more than one motherfucker up off my back. I lie to you not. I bullshit you not. Like I don't know, maybe it's the season. I don't know. Uh and in that one particular case, I was able to come through without the ego and strictly on the principle. A couple of them other times I got a little heated, say what I need to say, because I'm like, hey, again, I'm a wordsmith. You want to go here with me, coach? You want to go here with me, parent? You know what I'm saying? Like, let's go. I got time today. I got time today. So anyway, not justifying it. I'm just but we're human, right? We're all human and we're gonna be humans. And the point is to always grow and develop. And you try to be a little more consistent for the good in the long run, right? So anyway, thank you again for joining us. Please like, subscribe, share, do all of the things. Comment, let us know what you think. We appreciate you being with us, and we will see you soon again, okay? Thanks. Stay safe. Peace.